Hello, hello. This is Christina Barr. You're watching Black Tea News. Hello, welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and today we're going to be talking about a Georgia State Senator, Manuel Jones, who came for Clarence Thomas and decided to call him an Uncle Tom, which he also admitted that he doesn't really know much about Uncle Tom. So, which I thought was remarkable, but that tends to be the case when people use it as an insult, especially today, I guess. But so we'll be talking about that. For anyone wondering why I said today is the day I got to go off on Facebook, I wrote that on Facebook. That video is one of the reasons. This person who said that. Also, you know, I've had some traction with some of my videos referring to Dylan Mulvaney, and so someone came at me and said, "Oh, as a Black woman, this is really depressing or sad that you know you're saying these things." And I find when people try to relate my sex or particularly my race, I guess specifically my race, to some kind of you know, alphabet mafia thing, particularly in the transgender movement, I find it very offensive. So I want to get into that and the back and forth and exchanges and the thinking behind all this. It just doesn't make sense, and it's pretty offensive when you think about the implications of what they're suggesting. And also there is a story that news.com reported that a Democrat leader, you know, said their titles of their articles are kind of an exaggeration, but to kill disabled babies and abortions because they're drained on school funding. And that actually looking into it, that is basically, he didn't say that specifically, but that is what the meaning of that was. So we're going to be talking about those things today. A lot of these things are going to be social stuff today. If you want some breaking news stuff, I'm sorry, we're just kind of not going to get into it. Though I did hear there's another train derailment in my state, and there were some hazardous chemicals there as well. So either when I reported last week about the Ohio situation, I did read that there's about 1,000 train derailments a year. So that's a lot, and we don't normally hear about those things. So is this making the news because the one in Ohio just made the news? And is it particularly making the news because there's chemicals on board? So the question is, either this is happening more frequently or this happens a lot, and either is a cause for concern that it happens more often than what we know, and we don't know what they're not telling us or what they're not reporting, or there's something wrong with our systems or our safety, or I'm not going to go as far as saying it's a targeted sort of thing. I see those conspiracy theories floating around. I'm not saying those conspiracies aren't accurate. I'm just saying I think I need to see a little bit more before I go down that route. So crazy stories happening as far as that route goes, but going to be focusing on these particular issues today. But before we jump into it, I encourage you guys to go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on my website, different articles, different videos, check out different merch that we have on site, like the Be Better Not Better, I'm Not the Victim You're Looking For You guys can check out the goat hoodie, goat t-shirts for all you guys still on the Trump train. The hoodie's very comfortable. I do have both these myself. The Denounce White Supremacy, Defeat Joe Biden shirt with Elizabeth's racism on the back. I have the long sleeve version of this. It's also very comfortable. So you guys can get that stuff on the website. Also, you guys can go to the website and pre-order, of course, God is Blatantly Against Abortion. That's my book on, it's self-explanatory. Of course, God is blatantly against abortion. But the premise, and I guess I haven't talked about the premise or how it came to be in some time. I would talk about pro-life issues all the time, and people would say, even though I would say it in a very secular way, like life starts at conception, and I go through the science and say, therefore, I believe that's when the right to life should begin. It's the most consistent position. And people would be like, oh, just keep your God out of my uterus, and you believe in inherent value because of your religion, and they would just go down this route. And it's not something that's exclusive to me or something that only Christians get accused of, because secular pro-life, for example, they're all atheists and they get accused of being pro-life for religious reasons all the time. And so when we say, hey, biology says that life, science, it's life starts at conception, that's when we come into existence. There's no other point or whatever when our origin begins. And there's some like people who would say, well, there's different possible times when we could decide to acknowledge life begins, and which I've broken down in different videos today. I'm not trying to go through a long intro or explanation today, but which I've addressed those things, and I do address in the book. But conception is the most consistent standard or whatever, but biologists, it was like 96, 97, something, a large percentage of biologists agree, according to a study that was done, which a lot of people don't like the study, but the participants were pro-choice, like leftists, most of them were, as far as this being the scientific consensus. And so a lot of people talk about that particular number and how many biologists agree with it or disagree or whatever. But something else that's important from that Jacobson study, is it Jacobson or Jacobs? I think it's Jacobs. The study is that so a majority of like Americans, and I don't remember the specific numbers, it's in the book, but believe that when life starts at conception, that's important for people to know in order to have true informed consent. And when that point starts, that is when life should be protected. And they feel that biologists are the ones who can best determine that. And it's like 80% of Americans said that biologists are the ones that they trust to make that determination. But biologists are like, oh no, we can't make that determination, or scientists, they're like, that's not us. You got to go to theology, or you got to go to philosophy or something. That's not up to us. Or they'll say it can just be up to the women, but the women are saying, or they're like, we can't have true informed consent if we don't have an answer to this. So I go through the science and I go through the philosophy and I break down the theology. So there's a ton of stuff in the book, and I hope that it'll be useful to all of you when you decide to get it, of course. But you can get the Kindle version right now, or you can get it on Nook right now. Well, not to read it right now, but just to pre-order it, and the paperback will be available for pre-order sometime. So just make sure that you guys are following for updates. Also, this is a longer intro than I meant it to be, but I do have books available on Amazon as well. Most of them are nonfiction. Here's my historical fiction fantasy, or one of them is a sequel to The Color of God's Eyes, is a Song on the Devil's Lips. I do my own cover art, by the way. So it takes place in the Civil War era. It's a historical fiction fantasy. So lots of cool stuff that you guys can read. I have a pretty wild imagination. So if you go to Black Tea News and hit the merchandise page, there's a banner with some of my books on it. It'll take you over to my book website, or you can just search Christina Elbar on Amazon and you'll find me. You will find me. So go ahead and support. And if you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation at blacktnews.com, cost stream, run my website, do all that good stuff. So if you would like to support, please consider supporting in a gift today on the website. It does really help. I thank you guys for watching, for streaming, etc., for commenting. It all does really help the page grow. But if you can go the extra mile, I'm asking that you do go the extra mile. Okay, so I do have a meme today or something funny, the comic. Now, you guys have probably maybe seen this by now, and I have actually used this in the past, but I thought of it because I thought it was relevant to the conversations that we're going to be having today. And so this is from G Prime 85. I've done an interview with G Prime 85. If you well, that's his Twitter handle. George Alexopoulos. He's a great artist. I like his style. He's my sister's favorite artist. Actually, for her birthday last year, we had we paid for him to do a portrait of her, and so I don't have it pulled up right now, but it was really really good. She was so happy about it. But this is his art, and maybe you've seen this where there's a black woman and Joe Biden decides to take away her blackness, just sucks it right out of her, because she's wasn't going to vote for him. So so she just turned into a white person. So that one's a little old, and I have talked about it before. And I actually talked with him about this on our interview. So again, if you haven't seen it, I'll go ahead and check it out. But I wanted to show that and to segue into the commentary of the day, because there is this idea that I'm sure you guys are aware of, that if you do not believe certain things, then you are not a black person, like a legit black person, like your skin color won't fade away, like the Joe Biden thing that just, I showed you guys, but they won't consider you a true, authentic sort of black person with a black experience, etc., if you don't think a certain way. So people have this view of Justice Clarence Thomas, which is really incredible to me, because if you have not seen the documentary Created Equal, I think it's called, that's on Daily Wire, it's well worth checking out. It's well worth checking out. I think I'll have to do an article or something like top 5 interesting things that you'll learn during the documentary, something about Clarence Thomas. It's a very interesting documentary. But seeing his life growing up, and he had a point of time when he was like very angry and very like left wing, and he had a radical shift once he realized that he was just so angry, and he had become so angry because of the different racial division that was going on in the country. But he also felt like the church wasn't really not only not speaking out, but he had heard some folks say some things that were very offensive, and he just leaned in very hard to the left, and things got really out of control. And he just realized that his life was just full of anger and bitterness. So he just came back to God and committed himself over to, and wanted that anger taken away. And he researched and continued growing and learning, and studying people like Thomas Sowell, which Thomas Sowell used to be a left-wing person too. And then facts and data will change a person, I guess. So people have unique experience. Every individual has unique experiences, and just because someone disagrees with you does not devalue them as a black person. So there's so many people who dislike Clarence Thomas, and I saw someone tweet out this story, and there's people in the comments on Twitter talking about Clarence Thomas, and they're like, don't you know that he's against women? And when they say against women, they're talking about he's against women and women's rights because of abortion. That's what they mean. That's what they mean. And I find that offensive. I find that grotesque, that if you are not for this particular privilege, we'll not call it a right, a privilege to take away the right to life of someone else, then you're anti-woman. Like, why would I as a woman want that capability to take the life of my child? Like, it on demand. That's what people want. And on demand, any reason, any time, up to basically any date in some cases, with abortion. That's what they want. So if someone is saying that's not what the law says, then they're anti-woman. That doesn't track. That doesn't track. I think abortion makes women weak. And if you don't believe that, the sort of moaning and crying. And I understand people thought this was right for a long time, and it's gone poof. They some kind of adjustment people need to make, I suppose, in their minds. But there's this gnashing of teeth and deep distraught from all these people, because this is something that they've leaned on. The sort of conversations that you hear, like, what if my daughter, has to, she's in school and she has she gets, in a relationship, and she gets knocked up and with a child, and what are they going to do? I'm like, I don't know, raise the baby that is your grandchild. Like the sort of, there's some very empathetic stories that you can hear from women who find themselves in a situation where that seems like the option to take. That doesn't mean it's the best option, but I'm saying some women, their stories are more, you can empathize more than just, I mean, I've had people debate me and say, yeah, women should be able to do it because they had a one night stand. And I'm like, ma'am, like, it's just birth control to you. So I don't consider that right. Like Jennifer, or something that's made women strong, like having abortion, it's made women very weak. When Jennifer Lawrence says, we're no longer equal to men or something, I'm like, so this inherent thing that women can do, because men can't do that. They can't have babies. They don't have the equipment. They don't have their pelvis and all that stuff isn't made for that stuff. It's inherent to women being able to produce offspring. So if we don't have the ability to eliminate our offspring, then we're somehow not equal to men. So that means we're inherently like inferior in your opinion. So I don't know if all these people think these things through, but Clarence Thomas, being pro-life does not mean that he's anti-women. And then they bring up affirmative action and him being against affirmative action, and people who are so gung-ho about it. I had a conversation with someone one time and about affirmative action. I'm like, like affirmative action like hurts like other minority groups like Asians, right? Because it'll like pit them against each other. And then they just kind of pause and they're like, well, I know if it was my child, I'd want them to have an advantage. And I'm just like, that's because your child is black. Because your child is black, not because it's right, but just you want to enjoy the advantage. And I can't say I don't understand. That doesn't make it right though. And to believe that everyone should be able to have an equal sort of playing field, and it was funny. It was funny, their reaction. I'm like, obviously a biased opinion, but just because someone disagrees with something, that an opinion you have does not make them not black. It just doesn't. Like I talked the other day about how I won't say just because someone is a Democrat that they're not a Christian. Now we can have conversations and I can try to understand where they're coming from, and however they translate their Christian duties into politics, like there's some kind of disconnect there. Like they'll be like, oh, well, we have to give to the poor and we have to take care of the widows and the orphans and all these people. I'm like, oh, and I'll say, yes, that's our personal responsibility, not for the government to confiscate the resources to go ahead and take care of those people. That's on us. That's not on the government to do. So they think they're being compassionate in their mind. They're being compassionate and doing the Christian thing. I would disagree, but they're not doing it out of spite. So you need to see before you start trying to throw someone off a cliff or something for their opinion. I think you need to really kind of understand where they're coming from before you're like racism or something like that. Anyway, gonna go ahead and play this video from this state senator, because there's a discussion about Clarence Thomas having a statue, which he is a man of great stature, obviously, who has written, I think, more opinions than anyone on the bench. He's a very intelligent man, though people have done their best to degrade him throughout the years. One thing in the documentary, they showed different stuff where they said he was like Scalia's bootlicker, and it was Time magazine or somebody had a article of him shining Scalia's shoes, as if he's treating him as if he's some kind of diversity hire or something, as opposed to being a well-studied, brilliant man on the bench. So they've tried to degrade him, but he's accomplished a lot. He'll always be an icon to the pro-life community, obviously, for uh just as different opinions and etc. So even if you don't like him, I'm not fond of Ginsburg, but there was one store that was in a liberal city in Michigan, and they had all this like Ginsburg material, and you didn't see anything with Clarence Thomas, bobbleheads and all kind of stuff that people could get. She's an icon to so many women. But if I like Clarence Thomas, or someone likes Clarence Thomas, then they're bad for liking this person. So anyway, let's watch this video, go through it, and get to the heavy criticism.
It's sensitive to talk. And I know it's very, very sensitive to talk about race in this body, but anytime that we have a resolution, legislation proposing to place a statue of Clarence Thomas on this grounds, we cannot avoid that conversation, so I'm not going to avoid it either. In the Black community, we have an expression, and I don't want to use this label too deeply here because I'm just trying to tell you what we have in the African American community. When we talk about a person of color that goes back historically to the days of slavery and that person betraying his own community, we have a term in the Black community. That term that we use is called Uncle Tom. And Uncle Tom is
he is correct that is a thing. Doesn't mean that it should be a thing, and we'll get to that. But again, people talking about Clarence Thomas and not liking Clarence Thomas, you'll have to go on the merits of listing your reasons and breaking down whether they're good or bad. Like some people, they just say things as talking points and don't even understand, why it's good, why they deem it as racist, or won't look at the merits of something that they support if it's even legal. I mean, he is a Supreme Court justice, and so his job is to look at the Constitution and to look at the law and say, is this something that is in the law, or is it something that, like, it's not his job to just make up stuff from his own sort of ideology and whims. And you can disagree with an opinion or not, but like a lot of people, and he didn't write the Dobbs decision, but he had his separate, thing that he wrote that made people's heads explode about substantive due process. But people are so mad at Dobbs, for example, and I'm like, did you read it? Did you read it? And a lot of people who I question him, like, they didn't read it, or they don't have good explanations to why like Roe v. Wade and other stuff shouldn't be overturned. They have a lot of feelings, and I understand the feelings, but that doesn't mean that it's right. Even like the dissented opinion wasn't great in my opinion, just a lot of feelings again. But yeah, a lot of people don't like Clarence Thomas. I already gave like 2 reasons why. People in the comments are like, oh, he's against affirmative action. Oh, he's against women's rights. Which, by the way, in the documentary Created Equal, I did find it fascinating that when he first got nominated to the Supreme Court, the NAACP at first said that they were going to stay out of it. They were going to stay out of it, but then they switched their minds. And the reasons why they switched their minds is because that the women's groups, I guess, who were afraid of Dobbs one day, I mean, a situation like Dobbs happening where Roe v. Wade is overturned, they were scared about Clarence Thomas getting on the bench, and the women's groups wanted to attack him. And all these, I guess, white women out there needed some kind of cover. So they needed the black organization to denounce him first. So after the black organization could denounce him, that's when all the white people could come and treat him like garbage. And so, by the way, people do this all the time. And I'm not going to say the people on the right don't do it, but the people on the left certainly do it. When you watch things on, MSNBC, for example, and how hard they'll go toward black Republicans and etc., that they will just go hard, and then you'll see white libs coming up behind them to trash them. The irony is that they'll accuse black Republicans of being like stand-ins to push out, what was that, Dyson says, white supremacy through ventriloquism. It's like, bro, you guys are doing it. Like, legitimately. So that's an example where they needed the black organization to come out and trash the black man, because then all the people coming afterwards look better. Because if it was just the white people coming after them first without the black, kind of cloud hanging over it, then they look like, they're coming too hard for the black guy. So just wanted to throw out that context before we move on.
Either a fictional or non-fictional character. I don't really know the origin of Uncle Tom, but it talks about a person who back during the...
So again, he's talking about Uncle Tom. He just admitted that he does not know much about Uncle Tom. Now, he's correct that there's this phrase that's been in the black community for a long time and viewing black people as traitors. But it's very interesting that this old man who's referencing this to say, we should not have a statue of Clarence Thomas because we got to talk about race because it's inevitable. And he admits that he doesn't know much about Uncle Tom.
Days of slavery, sold his soul to the slave masters. That's the story, the fictitious of the story of an Uncle Tom. So when we think about a person in the black community who's accomplished, but yet policies seek to subvert, some may even say suppress, the achievements and accomplishments of people of color, I couldn't help but to think about that term in expressing my dissatisfaction with this particular legislation. Folks, as I said last year, y'all just don't get it. And I don't expect people of non-color to get the sensitivity that we feel about a person of color whose policies and practices and decisions and votes that we've rallied and fought against.
So, what a racist and ignorant troll. And to be braggadocious about how absolutely ignorant he is. If you were going to go on the Senate floor, would you at least just like if it was you, would you have at least looked up the story of Uncle Tom before you invoked him to put down Clarence Thomas, and even tried to explain it from what his memory is or what he's heard through propaganda about Uncle Tom's cat, or the character or the book or the story, Uncle Tom's Cabin? When I hear people talk about Uncle Tom's Cabin and they use Uncle Tom in some kind of derogatory tone, I have to question if that person has any sort of significance to the black community that has resulted in such a positive force of change than that fictitious character that's actually based on a real character or experiences from a real character. And we'll get into that. And the answer is usually no. This fool could only hope to dream to be as effective and powerful to make positive change for not just black people, but for the country as a whole, as this fictitious character that he's using to bring down Clarence Thomas, who will always be a far greater man than he. So I want to play a scene from The Jeffersons before we get into reading about Uncle Tom. Maybe you guys have seen this scene before. It's definitely making the rounds today. So, here's a scene from The Jeffersons talking about Uncle Tom.
Tell me something, George. You like to use the words Uncle Tom a lot, only when it fits. Do you know who Uncle Tom really was? Sure. He was that dumb nigga who used to thank Simon Legree for whipping him. Wrong. That's another one of those lies about our people that has been accepted as truth. Who was he then? Superfly in disguise? No, George. In real life, Uncle Tom was a slave named Josiah Henson, who escaped and walked all the way from Kentucky to Canada with his wife and children. And there he started the first manual training school for our people. How you knew that? I read. Sometimes I listen. You could do the same thing. Huh? You heard of the Underground Railroad? Sure. Well, Josiah Henson helped 100 slaves escape up north even before there was an Underground Railroad. He was a brave man, a great leader. And I'll tell you something else, George. I'd never call you an Uncle Tom.
Perfect. Just an absolutely perfect scene. Yeah, so I'd never call him an Uncle Tom. Emmanuel Jones could never hope to achieve that sort of cultural significance that book had, and to be as great as that character was. So, oh no, I mean the real life inspiration. So, I want to read a bit from the Smithsonian about Uncle Tom's Cabin and the real life person who inspired it. I've calmed down a bit from earlier when I said I was gonna like totally go off, but we're just gonna educate today, I suppose. Increase that a bit. So this is from the Smithsonian. The story of Josiah Henson, the real inspiration for Uncle Tom's Cabin. Before there was a novel by Harriet Beecher Stoll, formerly an enslaved African American living in Canada, wrote a memoir detailing his experience. So, from its very first moments to print in March 20th, 1852, Harriet Beecher Stoll's Uncle Tom's Cabin was a smashing success. It sold 3,000 copies on its first day, and Frederick Douglass reported that 5,000 copies, the entire first print run, were purchased within 4 days. By May 3rd, the Boston Morning Post declared that everybody has read it, is reading, or is about to read it. According to reports at the time, it took 17 printing presses running around the clock to keep up with demand. By the end of its first year in print, the book had sold over 300,000 copies in the United States alone, going on to become the best-selling novel of the 19th century. In Canada, a former enslaved laborer, an aging Methodist minister named Josiah Henson, whose life story bore uncanny resemblances to Stoll's particular character, immediately understood its importance. Born near Port Tobacco, Maryland, around 1789, Henson's first memory was of his father being whipped, having his ear cut off, and sold south, all as punishment for striking a white man who had attempted to rape his wife. He never saw his father again. Henson was later separated from his mother and sold to a child trafficker, but soon fell deathly ill. The slave trader offered the boy to Henson's mother's owner, an alcoholic gambler named Isaac Riley, for a bargain, free charge if the young Henson died, barter of some horseshoeing work if he survived. But he did recover, and Henson and his mother were enslaved about 12 miles from Washington, D.C. on Riley's plantation. He endured countless beatings as a child, especially after an ill-fated attempt to learn to read. Henson had great physical strength and leadership ability, and eventually became Riley's market man in the nation's capital. As a person in charge of selling all his master's farm produce, he rubbed shoulders with eminent lawyers and businessmen and learned the skills of running a business. Despite the fact that he wouldn't learn to read until much later in life, Henson became a great preacher, memorizing verses and relying on his eloquence and natural sense of humor to connect with parishioners. A white minister convinced him secretly to raise money to purchase his own freedom while traveling between Riley's family farms. The minister arranged for churches to host Henson, and he raised $350 towards his emancipation, but Riley swindled him out of the money and tried to sell him south to New Orleans. Henson narrowly avoided that harsh fate through a highly providential twist of events, Riley's nephew Amos, the young man tasked with selling Henson, contracted malaria. Rather than letting the son die, Henson loaded him on a steamship and returned north. In 1830, Henson ran away with his wife and two youngest children, then walked more than 600 miles to Canada. Once in a new land, Henson helped to start in 1841 a freeman settlement called the British American Institute in the area called Don, which became known as one of the final stops in the Underground Railroad. Henson repeatedly returned to the U.S. to guide 118 other slaves to freedom. It was massively dangerous undertaking, but Henson saw a greater purpose than simply living out his life in Ontario, Canada. In addition to his service at the school, Henson ran a farm, started a grist mill, bred horses, and built a sawmill for high quality black lumber so good, in fact, that it won him a medal at the World's Fair in London 10 years later. So incredible story, an incredible story. But he ended up publishing a book about himself, and he ended up talking to the author of Uncle Tom's Cabin. And so when she published this book, Uncle Tom's Cabin, Stoll's purpose for publishing the book was to change people's minds about slavery. She wanted people to understand the plight of the Negro and what sort of things were happening, and to change hearts and minds. She was a Christian woman, and her goal was to start, I guess you could say, a revival in the hearts of these people, and to make radical change. Now, her critics, which she had a lot of critics, it was a very popular book, but she had critics for sure. They would say that her book was largely propaganda, and that it was emotional, and it wasn't true, or things were highly exaggerated. So she decided to go ahead and publish the truth. And so she wrote after making her book Uncle Tom's Cabin, and to address the haters, she actually published another book with the accounts of who she had based the stories off of, and detailing events and records and references to the horrors that her characters had suffered. And the character of Uncle Tom was based on Josiah. So a lot of the accounts that were with his life lined up with the actual story in the book. Now, in the book, Tom was a very religious person, and the media back then, or people looked, not, I guess not the media, but people looked at Tom as like a saintly sort of figure. But despite how people were treating him and how cruel the world was to him, he was deeply Christian. And his story ended with their the slave. He ended up being whipped to death because he wouldn't rat out two other slaves. And so people ended up eventually thinking that, I guess, he was too nice, and that he was too subservient, and like Malcolm X, wasn't fond of him. Now there were portrayals of him that made him like a character that would sell out or something, but the actual story, the actual book, Uncle Tom is the hero of the tale. He was heroic to other slaves, and he was a good Christian person. And the impact of this book was tremendous, because even people in the North, I think there was a quote by Abraham Lincoln that was like, "What ended slavery?" And he referenced this book because it had such a cultural impact. And people in the North, they were so far kind of removed from the plights of the Negro during that time, that they just didn't think about it. They didn't think about how horribly they were people were treated, and how bad slavery was, or maybe there was some propaganda that people were listening to, like it wasn't so bad. So people reading this book and consuming this book and it becoming such a popular book really changed the tide of the conversation. And it was also adapted to different stage plays, like P.T. Barnum, for example. It was in his museum. If you watch like Greatest Showman and stuff, like he actually did have like a museum and stuff. And they would play Uncle Tom's Cabin. So it really rocked the world. It really rocked the world. So it is unfortunate. And it's a disservice and it's disrespectful to the legacy of this book, this character, and also the person of whom it's based off of, or that it's inspired off of, to use the term Uncle Tom as being some kind of traitor. So this state senator in Georgia is very ignorant, obviously. I can't imagine using that as such a point and then being like, by the way, I don't know much about it. And then like I would have at least Googled it or watched something before he got up and said, well, we can't have a Clarence Thomas statue. We got to talk about race because y'all won't understand because this man is a traitor. Okay. And I would like to see him substantiate all the reasons to why he feels that that's the case. And then he can debate other people on whether, you know, the policies or the judicial decisions that Clarence Thomas makes actually has anything to do with race or makes someone a traitor or not, or whether it's just looking at the law and is this the law? Like your race shouldn't have anything to do with the decisions that you make. Your experiences should have anything to do with the experiences that you're making. Like, is it the law? Is it not the law? What is in the Constitution? Is this legal? Is this not? Or is it going against someone's rights, or is it not? Like those are the things to discuss. But just because you don't like someone and you don't like who they might have voted for, or you know who his wife supported or whatever, that does not make someone a traitor. And people do talk about the Black community and have conversations like that, but who gets to say what is the entirety of the Black community? Who gets to determine that? Certainly not this man, pronouncing his ignorance and doing a disservice to history. It's funny that people are like, oh, we need these Republicans. They don't want to support history and they're against critical race theory because they don't want people to learn history, etc. When CRT isn't accurate history, it's a worldview that's a subjective worldview. It rejects objectivity, actually. So it's definitely a ideology and not history in any sense of the word. But these people are like, these people need to learn true history, and then you go out and repeat these slurs that have evolved into such nonsense. So if you haven't, again, watched Clarence Thomas's documentary on the Daily Wire's app, Created Equal, it's very good. It's well worth your time to understand him, his journey, where he's come from, how he came to his judicial philosophy. I thought it was very fascinating. And you know, I get called an Uncle Tom for the dumbest of reasons. For the dumbest of reasons. And people really throw that word around. I can't remember what spawned me writing an article, but I wrote an article that said the left hates me and I'm proud. And I did reference Clarence Thomas, and I referenced Larry Elder. And in the article, he actually retweeted it, and which I very much appreciate. And he started following me on Twitter. So hey, that was kind of a big moment. But there is a real disdain for people who don't march lockstep with you as far as your mentality. People talk about being inclusive, but they don't mean that. They just mean they want you to be variant shades. You know, when you play a video game and they have different colors, like you're a character in the game, but the they didn't have time for a whole new outfit redesign. So if you're playing like Mortal Kombat or something back in the day, it's like, oh, you're you know, Catania or something, but your outfits change, like it's different colors if you're one player, two player, something like that. That's what it's like. They say that they want inclusion. No, they just want the same person with a different outfit on. That's what they want. Just the same person with a variant short of shade or color. They don't want a separate character or separate person who's sentient and able to have their own thoughts, their own free will, and be a separate individual to express themselves and to think critically. That's not what they want. That's not what they want. You can do it a little bit, but as long you can't veer off from how they've defined you in that variation of that NPC you're supposed to be. So it's unfortunate. Um but men it makes perfect sense to have a statue of Clarence Thomas. He's accomplished a lot, and to have the nerve to say he's an Uncle Tom, and all you people, what all you white people don't understand. Yeah, they don't understand. They're puzzled. I'm puzzled too, sir. We're puzzled. So you should have to substantiate your argument and not say, "Oh, we just have feels because we're black." No, not good enough. Not good enough. And you know what? You're not going to agree with everyone that they put a statue of anyway, but you still have to weigh the merits of their impact and go from there. Let's move on. This story is dark. So lifenews.com is reporting this story about a Democrat leader who is turning to eugenics to justify coming against pregnancy crisis centers. So I'm going to go ahead and run through this article. Okay. Democrat leader kill disabled babies and abortions because they're a drain on school funding. So Massachusetts Democrat leader is facing criticism for making discriminatory comments about children with disabilities, suggesting they should be aborted because they are a drain on public school funding. Framingham, I'm sorry, I don't know where that is. Democratic Committee Chair Michael Hugo made the comment February 7th during a Framingham City Council meeting as the city leaders consider a proclamation to condemn the work of pro-life pregnancy resource centers. The proclamation for the protection of reproductive rights claims the pro-life charities are deceptive and misleading, and aborting unborn babies is a fundamental right. The city is located just west of Boston. During public comment period, Hugo urged the council to pass a proclamation and discourage pregnancy resource centers from opening in the city. One of the reasons he gave was his fear that more children with disabilities will be born and cost the city money. Our fear is that if unqualified sonographer misdiagnoses a heart defect, an organ defect, a spina bifida, that becomes a very local issue because our school budget will have to absorb the cost of a child in special education, supplying lots and lots of special services to children who were born with the defect, Hugo said. Notably, Hugo told the council that he made the comment on behalf of the whole Framingham Democratic Committee, something other local Democrats vehemently denied, according to the Framingham source, which first broke the news about Hugo's comments. As a lifetime member of FDC, I am repulsed. District 8 City Councilor John Stefani told the source. Hugo's written in a verbal testimony suggesting that aborting fetuses to save on special education costs is repugnant and the vile philosophy used by dictators to justify genocide of people deemed unworthy of life. I'm going to go ahead.
Unqualified. Our fear is that if an unqualified sonographer misdiagnoses a heart defect, an organ defect, spina bifida, or an encephalopathic defect, that becomes a very local issue because our school budget will have to absorb the cost of a child in special education, supplying lots and lots of special services to children who were born with the defect. So it's our hope that the council tonight will pass this ordinance.
Yeah. So that's super creepy. Other people are saying his comments were truly repulsive, but he also these weren't off the cuff comments, by the way, because he actually had a letter that he sent out. As for those who say that our council has no business dealing with the state issue, we ask if the state is going to cover the medical costs for a fetus that had sound medication reason to be terminated. Is the state going to cover the cost of special education for Down syndrome affected child? Is the state going to pay for the extraordinary medical expense of a child with an atrial defect? How much does Framingham's public school department pay for unreimbursed special needs school transportation, specialized education, and durable supplies? So he asked that the local media didn't write a story on him, and he said that he made a terribly irresponsible statement that he regrets incredibly, and he doesn't want them to compound on his mistake, and he's regretful for his statement. He's probably regretful that it came out, and certainly, and I guess someone could have said, hey bro, this is why this is uncool, and he realized why this is eugenics and gross and disgusting. But I don't know. So many people use eugenics types reasons to justify abortion anyway, but the story is pretty fascinating, egregious but fascinating. So I talked about Uncle Tom's Cabin and when that was released, and how the critics tried to say that it was emotional propaganda to try to stop, the anti slavery, the abolition movement from really progressing and getting people to realize that slavery is evil. And people are really trying to go after pregnancy crisis centers and saying that they're using propaganda and they're saying things that are not aligned with science and etc. And going after these vulnerable women who are upset, and maybe if they had resources and care and help, that maybe they wouldn't terminate the life of their child. So you would think that if these people were pro-choice and they just merely would want women to have the option, if they feel that they need to have an abortion, if they were pro-choice, then why aren't they okay with people trying to convince women of a different choice? Because it's still their choice, right? So why is it that they are upset when people out here trying to save lives? Because it doesn't seem like you're actually pro-choice or that you're pro-woman. It just seems that, or pro-family in any sense of the word, that you just want to protect abortion, and you're just pro-abortion, and you are for abortion, and you think it's healthcare, self-care, or that you think that's how you do a proper ethnic cleansing, or get rid of disabled people and you clean up your tax dollars. That's what it seems like, that's what you're pushing for. And so this is another trend. Like, this is not like a rare sort of incident as far as like people coming against pregnancy crisis centers in Michigan. Our governor who got reelected, she, her spokesperson, she vetoed, used her veto power to strike funding for pregnancy crisis centers, which people complain with pregnancy crisis centers, they don't feel that they're doing enough, but the more funded they are, the more they can accomplish. So she struck funding from them, and she struck funding for promotion of adoption over abortion. And the reason being, her spokesperson said that these groups use, misinformation, to target women, etc. And you had Keith Ellison, who issued an advisory warning about pregnancy crisis centers, and Elizabeth Warren railed against pregnancy crisis centers, and she's so angry that they outnumber abortion clinics 3-1. And so again, it just seems like these people are very pro-abortion, and as Joe Biden used to say, abortion is a tragedy, not a right. But we're all aware of what it actually does if we're honest enough to just say it, that it does kill a woman's offspring. That's the purpose of the abortion, so that baby will not pass through live. So let's just be honest about what it is. And so if it's and I feel that's a tragedy. Like, it is a tragedy, and most people before would think that was a tragedy. So if we can come together and just admit that to some degree, why isn't it a good thing if we can help a woman, if we can convince her to not choose abortion? Because they're really trying to protect this choice of abortion. But this person went as far to say that, hey, we need to be able to get rid of these pregnancy crisis centers, because what if they like convince a woman or something to keep that baby, and what if that person gets absorbed into the school system and we have to pay for special education, or what if we have to use federal funds for their illnesses or this leads to like a different interesting point. Because if you're pro-life and you're conservative, because that's mostly who people you can be Democrat and pro-life. You can. I'm not saying you can't. It's just more of a rarity. But if you're pro-life and you're on the right, which is the more likely scenario, people will say you're not actually pro-life because you don't support universal health care. You don't support pre-K, all this stuff. They have a laundry list of things. I've heard people list free college, free dental, paid maternity leave, like so many things. And I'm like, you just kind of seems like you want free stuff and you're not like super concerned about your baby at this point. But like just a laundry list of things. So I call them a list of demands, like for like a hostage situation, like give me these things when a baby gets it. That's what it seems like. But they'll have this list of things and say, you are not a good person, or you're not actually pro-life if you don't support all these things. Now, my concern about when the government's dollars gets involved is that government dollars comes with government strings attached. Always do. Like, one reason why you had decisions of the Supreme Court that came through regarding COVID. The OSHA mandate got struck down, but the mandate regarding that healthcare workers had to get vaccinated, that was upheld. And the reasoning was that they're receiving like Medicaid, Medicare, whatever, and those are federal funds being supplied to the hospitals. So there's the government money here is coming with government strings attached, right? And I don't think that was the right decision or whatever, but it was a decision that came. But if that's the reasoning, that if you accept government money, the government has to dictate what happens to you. Why would you want the government more involved with your life, especially with your healthcare? So women are telling the government at this point that when they're like, we need abortion, there is no right to life, at least not until after you're born. Like, we decide when that is, et cetera, when it's out of you, whatever. So what they're telling the government is that your baby has no right to life. And by right to life, that's not a right to live forever or anything, but it's a right to not be killed. That's how you can define or explain the right to life. So women are telling the government that their baby has no right to not be killed. And they are hoping that this right to not be killed will be protected or solely be in the hands of the woman. Now, I'd be concerned about that, because the government didn't care about your bodily autonomy during COVID, right? So there may come a day, in some kind of dystopian future, I guess, when the government's like, no, we're going to take you up on their offer, and we're going to say that your child doesn't have a right to not be killed. You just don't want to go slippery slope routes, because he's saying, this man is saying that you don't want government money to have to pay for a child with some kind of special needs. And he's talking about trying these groups we don't want these women to be convinced to not kill their babies. They're not holding them down and making them have them. There's no force. There's just persuasion. They don't want people to be persuaded into not doing it, so they don't have to foot the bill. So another thing to think about, people always like universal healthcare, etc. Think about Canada. Think about Canada right now and euthanasia. And last I heard, it was about last year was reported it was like 3% of the deaths or something um, from euthanasia, and they're about to lax some more of the requirements to be able to have medical assistance in dying. There's some people like, I believe that people should be able to have that right. I don't like. I don't think I think when our government gets involved with something like that, it gets to really dark places very fast. And I think we're seeing that in Canada. But there was a story that I think the Associated Press covered this, and a couple people who, were going through medical assistance to dying, or were talked about medical assistance in dying, that it wasn't brought up for them. But one person was in the hospital, and the doctor brought it up, and they brought up how expensive it would be for them to be in the hospital. So people think, I'm like, okay, all these people think that everything's just being covered, and there's all these people, well, not all these people, but there are people in Canada being told to off themselves to save money, or people think that that's a better way to save money and feel that that's their option, or the doctors are suggesting it because the bills are so large. So what happens when you become a bottom line instead of a person with inherent value? What happens when you become a bottom line and you're totally like dependent upon the government's dollar and their funds, and they're not collecting enough? Well, maybe they get to start deciding and picking and choosing what kind of person is going to be helpful to society. And they start, getting rid of people based on eugenics. And it's not just like health reasons why people suggest abortion with eugenics. It's, people talk about financial all the time. They're like, oh, women of color, they'll be in financial straits if they don't have an abortion. Your bank account is not a sufficient reason to disregard someone's life. It's just not. Life is not linear. You don't know how your life could change 10 years from now, 5 years from now, tomorrow. You don't know. You don't have that sort of omniscience to know what the world will be like. Maybe you'll be in poverty forever to the end of your days. That doesn't mean that you can't find meaning in your life, and that the child that you will bear won't have meaning in their life, or that they'll escape poverty. Especially if we're talking about the United States of America, a land of opportunity where you can have a viral TikTok or video or something and just, I don't know, change your life. And by the way, the Turnaway study, and I've mentioned this before, the Turnaway study, the people cite like, oh, it follows all these women who are turned away from abortion and their economic status, etc. And there's a lot of problems to be had with the study. But one thing that's fascinating that doesn't make a lot of headlines is that 96% of women who are turned away from abortion don't regret not getting their abortion. And Secular Pro-Life pointed this out, that a third of women don't regret not getting an abortion after the first week of being turned away. So if 1 week could make a difference between women deciding not to have an abortion, don't you guys think it's really egregious that we have abortion on demand, and we fight so hard, or not we as an I, but other people fight so hard for women to be able to just go ahead and have an abortion as quick as possible without people taking the time to really deter them from it? I think those sort of stats make abortion extraordinarily immoral. Extraordinarily. If 1 week can make all the difference in the world between you embracing being a mother, or giving up that child so someone else can embrace being a mother, whatever the case is, I think your relationship or the inherent value of that child is worth more than I don't know, that job you couldn't take, that class you couldn't finish. And if you don't think so, I mean, I suppose that would be child sacrifice, but people don't like when you use lingo like that. Is it not technically that? If someone's life is worth that promotion? worth that job, worth that degree? Did you not sacrifice someone to get there? So anyway, I think we just kind of need to be careful about where we're going as a whole, as a nation, and our thinking when we decide who has inherent value and not. And we need to be very careful about how much we intertwine our lives with government assistance and programs. I fully understand that people need help sometimes, though our dependency on those things was planned, FYI, by eugenics also. Um, Royal Meeker, for example, believed that if we had things like the minimum wage, that it would lead to more people ultimately being on assistance. And he thought it was a good thing if people were on assistance, because if you're out there doing your own thing and you're working hard and you're able to be kind of the master of your own destiny, they didn't like that. They wanted you to be like under the heel of the government. So he was a eugenicist and he worked under the Woodrow Wilson administration. So this history has a lot of prominent eugenicists and different levers of power. It's not so. I guess some of them haven't gone anywhere to some degree, but it's not. They start to kind of fizzle out as far as their popularity after World War II with the Nazis and all that stuff. But doesn't mean people don't still hold eugenics mentalities to some degree, and we still see it today. We definitely still see it today. Yeah, but as far as how minimum wage led to people being unemployed and stuff, that was something that people were aware of. Eugenicists was aware of as well. But to quickly go through it, let's say you have a white guy or something who thinks he's too good to work for, let's say, $5 or something, and a black guy's like, I'll work for $5. And so the black person has a job and he can take care of his family. And the white person's like, no, we can't do that. So let's raise the minimum wage to like $8 or something. And so people, are more likely to hire someone like the white guy or something. And then the black guy would get, he can't kind of undercut and do like a competitive wage thing. He's just not employed. So the real minimum wage is $0. And Thomas Sowell talked about how minimum wage actually led to a lot of black unemployment stuff, but those are longer conversations for other days. Last thing I want to mention, and I know that I am over, but I do want to talk about this. So I posted a video about Dylan Mulvaney because people are like, why don't you just leave her alone? Which he's a he, but I'm like, I don't think you guys are the least bit sincere when you say that to me, because this person has amassed a following of 10 million followers. They've chronicled their days of girlhood, saying the most outrageous, dumb things, and a lot of them that are pretty offensive and stereotypes and parody. I mean, so many people were like debating, is this a parody account? And even before doing the days of girlhood thing, Dylan did some very thirst for fame sort of things. So so this person who's getting all this attention, and they're highlighting this person and uplifting them, and he's been before the president, and he's in Ulta, did a podcast with him, and then he Tampax reached out, and he was, for him to do something with Tampax. So this is not a person who's living in a bubble, and he definitely wants attention. But the true sort of crime of society is that so many people are uplifting this person, and there's other people who've done days of girlhood knockoff like tampon sort of videos similar to Dylan, and he's spawning. And so people are concerned about the social contagion that's going on, not just the social contagion, but they're also concerned about why are these sorts of people being uplifted and protected. Because if you say stuff about him on like TikTok and stuff, your video is very likely to get taken down, though there seems to be a tide shift a bit. At least that's what people are saying. But and then like the mob will come for you. So the app is very protective over Mulvaney, or at least have been. So when he addressed his haters, he definitely said women on Twitter. And I'm sure he said women on Twitter because he doesn't really have a lot of opposition on TikTok because he's protected on there. And Twitter is owned by Elon Musk and he believes in free speech. So anyway, I did a video just kind of laying out, like, you guys aren't actually mad at me talking about this stuff. You're mad that I'm not a clapping seal, saying yes, Queen Slay, and just affirming Dylan and the delusion and stuff. So I got this comment under that video and said, this is disappointing coming from a Black woman, especially after seeing what was done to Michelle Obama and Serena Williams. And someone said, genuinely asking, what is the correlation? And they said, transphobia. White conservatives use it to oppress women, and successful Black women are the whipping post. Michelle has 2 parents, a husband, and 2 kids to prove she is a woman, yet half the country believes she is a man because of Black features and a strong will. No, I would say that people say that about Michelle because they don't like her. They don't find her to be the most attractive female. Some people might not, and I know dudes who love Serena. I know dudes who love Serena, and so that person, though, I'm thinking about a specific person. And he actually told me that he thought I looked like Serena. I'm like, is this guy hitting on me? But I don't think I look like Serena, the Williams sisters at all. But that is what someone told me. I'm not claiming that. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying I don't think we look alike. But I definitely know men who like the Williams sisters. But as far as Michelle Obama, a lot of people are just trolling. Like, to say that half the country believes she's a man, or that anyone who really says it believes that she's a man, that is like a small number of people who genuinely believe that. That would be a very small number. People are trolling. It's the internet. It is the internet. So people will say things about people they do not like. People have said things to me in retaliation and come for my looks and other stuff because they don't like what I'm saying. So that is not a right thing. It's not rooted in conservatism or anything like that. But as far as this first comment, disappointing coming from a Black woman, I despise when people say things like that. Talk about, oh, as a Black woman, you should be this, or you should think this, or you should do this. And then they always relate to something dumb. Especially when it's anything related to the alphabet mafia, but particularly relating it to like the trans issue. Because again, this is under a comment about Dylan Mulvaney. So it's disappointing that me, a biological woman, would refer to Dylan as a man, and they see that as transphobia, homophobia, etc., and that I am somehow the oppressor, because they've made other comments since then, that I'm somehow agreeing or acting as an oppressor because I'm pointing out reality. So when someone says that Michelle or Serena or whoever is a man, they're saying that to be jerks because they're saying rude things to get under someone's skin or whatever. That's why they're going that route, but it's not true. When I say Dylan Mulvaney is a man, it's because it's true. And I particularly pointed out because so many people are trying to convince us of a lie that is not true, and are trying to bully people into being silent or just going along with the delusion. Dylan Mulvaney is a man. He was born a white man. He will die a white man. He will always be a man. It doesn't matter how much woman face he wears. It doesn't matter if Matt Walsh called him a human deep fake, which if you didn't see him going off, it was brilliant. He went off about Dylan Mulvaney. It doesn't diminish my Blackness. It doesn't diminish me as a woman, but this person had BLM and stuff all in their profile, and trans women, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. And he also said, or I don't know what the actual gender or whatever this person is, but they also said that trans Black trans women are the most oppressed group in the country. And that's one of the reasons why I could not stand BLM. Even before they had their What We Believe page together that got like kicked off, way early in the when Black Lives Matter was conceptualized, I went to their website and they made it clear that Black trans women, as in men who are impersonating women or believe they're women or whatever, that those people are like their concern, not their main concern, but they are uplifting them over other folks because they believe that they are the true victimized group, the most oppressed group. So they would uplift him over the people weren't really saying cis back then, but over biological Black men. And so during 2020, when I like looked at their like website again, I'm like, they still have like, I was surprised that they still had like similar language, but they regarding that issue, and they had their What We Believe page, and they said that they wanted to disrupt the nuclear prescribed the Western prescribed nuclear family. So they said they wanted to get rid of that. And they had all these groups that they were inclusive about, but they didn't really uplift the Black father. Wasn't in their stuff. But one thing that I mentioned the other day is that, and I wrote an article about this recently on blacktnews.com, is that they said that they wanted to dismantle cisgender privilege. So when you see like women crying because they lost opportunities in sports, or Dylan Mulvaney saying, "Don't call the police on me when I'm in your bathroom," and be careful what you're saying on the internet because we're not going to tolerate your transphobia forever, and your tweets are forever, and we'd hate for them to come back and bite you. And he said that smiling, but I'm like, that's a threat, bro. You just threaten your dissenters. And this is a person who said he wants to make calling him a man illegal because apparently calling him a man is worse than being called a sexual predator. That's what he said. So that sort of mentality where they feel entitled to supersede the feelings of women and to make them uncomfortable, that comfortableness you went in the bathroom and it was the girl's bathroom, that was cisgender privilege. They want to dismantle that. And if you speak up about how you're a vulnerable young minor in the YMCA shower and a big man comes in and you're concerned for your life or your safety or whatever, they want to make you look like the bad guy. So that was one of the reasons I always disliked BLM. My sister knew somebody who went to a BLM meeting and they thought they were going to talk about, I don't know, police brutality and all kinds of stuff, pro-Black stuff. They said all they talked about was gay stuff the whole time. And if it was a group that like, I just don't think a lot of people had that perception of BLM, especially when some of their finances started to come out, and what they put their money toward. They pocketed a lot of it. And when they started giving it to particular groups, the groups that they invested in, a lot of them were trans groups, were Black trans groups. So I told this person, I said, don't come for me talking about as a Black woman and pretend that you care about Black women when you're up here with BLM in your profile, when they purposely want to uplift men cosplaying as women as being superior to or prioritize over women. I won't say superior, but they prioritize them. That's their goal, to prioritize them. We have adversarial like ideologies, like objective truth, like Dylan Mulvaney's a man. And if you say otherwise, we are you have an adversarial position to reality, to the truth. I can't gel with you. I can't be your ally on that. I can't be your ally. I don't want to be your ally. We're adversary. You're my adversary in this. So these things don't correlate. These things do not correlate at all in the least. And it's not just I'm not fond of Michelle Obama. I haven't called her a dude or anything like that. Again, when people say that, it's just mostly, internet trolls. I've been to a lot of Republican meetings. We do not spend a lot of time talking about how Michelle actually has a dong. We don't say things like that. That's like troll space. And it's a troll space that's been, talked quite a bit. I'm not going to pretend like I don't see memes when I surf the internet, but there's no correlation to me saying that Dylan is a man because other people have bad behavior. They're saying that to be jerks. I'm saying it because it's true. I'm saying it because it's true. So I got my feelings out. I'm not as hot as, when I typed out a big reply at first anyway. And I did see I had quite a few notifications on Twitter. So I'll have to check that out when I'm done. But, yeah, please don't do that. Like, as a Black woman, people say that, about, whether it's trans issues or gay issues, or they'll say that even with abortion and stuff, like, as a Black woman, I should think whatever the heck I think as an individual. I'm well aware of the fact that I'm a Black woman. Well aware. But you don't get to tell me how to live my experience and what to think. We can debate. We can have conversations. But why don't you have a conversation with me as like an individual? Now, as a woman, though, I can say that I, would hate the idea of a man being in my locker room. I would hate that, especially as a young woman in high school. I empathize with that experience of being a young woman in the locker room and already not comfortable. So you want to introduce a man, and some of these dudes like Leah Thomas, who apparently has a fetish about just being aroused, having female parts or female kind of body and stuff, that person who was in the YMCA the other day while the gun girl was showering, that Chrissy, I can't think of Chrissy's name, but Redux did a deep dive on his social media. I wouldn't want to be alone in a locker room naked with him either, to be frank. And I'm not saying that women can't be vulnerable with other women in the locker room when there's not maybe some danger or something there. Actually, I know for a fact that's not true. Like, there was years ago, gosh, I hope this is over, but a school teacher, she's passed away now, but she said that there were like lesbian gangs who were attacking women in the bathrooms. So I'm not going to pretend like there's not other dangers from just, women. But there's a reason why we have sex segregated spaces. And it's not like totally just out of living in fear, but we deserve to have some level of comfort. And if you decide to transition, that is a choice that you have made. Like, I understand you might have gender dysphoria. You can't help how your brain is. You can't help that. But when you decide to impose on other people, that is a choice that you decided to make. And it's not fair to everyone else. And you can't guilt me out of objective truth and reality because I'm Black. Because of however you feel my Black experience should produce so many emotions and feelings that I can just overlook the fact that Dylan Mulvaney is just a patriarchy in a dress. Like, I can't do that. Sorry. Well, I'm sorry. Because I'm not sorry. Sorry for saying sorry. Because I'm not. Anyway, thank you guys for watching and joining me today. Please go to blacktnews.com. Check out different content on my website, different articles, different videos, etc. Please go ahead and subscribe or to my email list so you guys can get updates on stuff like my book. Of course, God is Blatantly Against Abortion. By the way, I am going to be going to Motor City Comic Con. So if you're in Michigan area or close to it, I'll be there in May, and I'll be having a lot of my books there. So you can get one signed if you would like. So if you want to learn more, you can go to my website. My book website is Ninja Dust Publishing. But if you go to blacktnews.com, there's a banner at the top that'll take you over to my website to learn more. But you can just search me on Amazon. And if you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation to blacktnews.com, cost to stream, run my website, etc. If you would like to help with that overhead, God bless you. I very much appreciate it. Whether it's a gift of $10 or $20 or $50 or more, it is very much appreciated, like to like knock out a bunch of overhead stuff, like in like a couple of, you know, just yearly payments instead of just like other stuff. But if you could, you know, help, there's, when I make kind of fancier videos, there's different software that I use that can be pricey, and I need some new equipment, to be frank. But if you can, and you want to go that extra mile, thanks. And thank you guys for watching live. Thank you guys for people watching it back. Thank you guys for commenting. That does all help with the algorithm, etc. And I don't know if YouTube will monetize me. I don't know why Facebook took off the monetization for the videos. But you can leave stars. It's the only way you can basically help that way. But YouTube, I'm not monetized yet. I have no idea if they will monetize me. And I doubt that a lot of things that I talk about, they will not demonetize. So we'll see. We will find out together. I'll let you know. God bless you, and I'll see you tomorrow.